Is screen time sometimes a battleground and struggle for your family? If it is, you're not alone and you're in the right place because I'm going to be sharing lots of strategies and solutions that I share with my clients. So the problem is kids want more, and parents and educators and doctors want kids to have less. And that's the start of the problem. But sometimes when we get into the struggles, we end up igniting the fire and things get worse, sometimes even out of control. So I'm Dr. Ellen. I'm going to be sharing 6 practical and implementable strategies to help you end the battleground and strategies and make screen time work. I'm going to talk about the risks of excess screen time. I'm going to talk about the recommendations that the authorities talk about. And then after, I'm going to have a serious conversation with you about what you can do and how you can handle and alleviate the problems. I'm also going to offer you, because I know it could be helpful, I'm going to offer you a copy of my notes. If you stay till the end, I'll tell you how you can get a copy of my notes that I'm using for this topic, because there's a lot of information. So let's dive right in. The first comment I want to make on this is that all of the recommendations and the authorities agree that excess screen time can be risky and it can interfere with our kids' learning. And so that's the recommendations and the feeling of pediatricians and psychologists and child psychiatrists, doctors, educators, and parents. They all agree. There are so many issues in the world, and on most issues, there are differing opinions, sometimes polar opinions. For example, the COVID vaccine. Many people are for it, many people are against it. And, I have to understand when I listen to people's opinions that there are differing opinions, people have reasons. Even something simple like eggs. Some people think it's healthy to eat eggs. Some people think it's not healthy. So on so many issues in the world, there are differing opinions. But on screen time, everyone, all the authorities agree. It's not controversial. We want our kids to limit screen time. There's nobody who will tell you if you want your kid to be happy, healthy, and successful in school, give them extra screen time. No one will tell you that. So we all want kids to have screen time limited, except of course for kids. So let's talk about how we can accomplish that. First, I want to go over what some of the risks are of excess screen time. And then I'm going to translate that to parent talk and what those risks really translate into. So when you look at any of the lists of the experts, of the doctors and the research, the first point they bring up is sleep problems and interrupted sleep caused by screens and devices. And screens and devices emit blue light, blue rays, and blue rays can affect and lower melatonin. And melatonin is important for good sleep cycles, for falling asleep, and for when you wake up during the night, falling back asleep. And so if you have excess screen time, you really have to worry about the melatonin and about interrupted sleep. A second thing that's very often on the lists of the authorities is the sedentary habits brought about by excess screen time, the just sitting still. And that can lead to weight gain and childhood obesity, which is a big problem in society. Because instead of kids being out with physical activity, with excess time in front of the computer, they're just sitting still. A third risk and problem is a decrease in focus and attention. On the screen, there's what I call hyperactive motion. The image changes quickly. There's a lot of colorful screens. So kids are just sitting there and they're mesmerized. They're really looking at the screen because it's so interesting and it can be addictive. But then when they go to pick up a book and it's just a white page and black print, it's hard for them to stay focused because they're so used to this hyperactive stimulus. Same when they go to school and there's a teacher who just writes on a board or stands and just talks to them. It's not that hyperactive motion that they're used to on their screens. And so kids have trouble focusing. They've lost attention span. And the other item that's often on the list of the authorities is that sitting for long periods of time can result in mood problems, emotional problems, sometimes behavior issues, and depression. So that's a topic, again, that's on a lot of lists. Let's talk about parent language. How does that translate into parent language? So if a child has sleep problems, interruptions with sleep, and they wake up in the morning and they're tired, what does that mean? Well, that means your child is going to school tired, and a tired child is not set up for a successful school day. So the results of not sleeping well can be a child who's edgy or stressed, or again, who has poor focus, poor attention, who's distractible. And because they're tired, they may not take part in social activities or in physical activities that they otherwise might want to take part in. And for us as parents, what kids do on those long hours of watching the screen is they're sitting on the couch spaced out. It's really mindless activity that's very often just passive. You're sitting there, and what's creative is the computer. What's active is the computer, but the child is just sitting passively. And that's why kids like it, because it's easy. All they have to do is sit there. But that's why it's dangerous, because they're not creative. They're not using their independent thinking skills or developing either their creativity or their independent thinking skills. And that's why we're really so concerned about that as doctors, as educators, and as parents. So I want to briefly talk about what the recommendations are by the authorities for screen time. So the recommendation is under 18 to 24 months, no screen time. And I agree with that strongly. We want babies and young children to learn about the environment on their own, through their own eyes. We want them, and they're really not learning on devices at that time. We don't really want them to be exposed to that hyperactive motion. We want them to learn to have attention and to focus through their own eyes in their own world, in the environment. Other than video chatting with family, which is really an exception that we allow because it is valuable for kids of any age to be chatting with grandparents and relatives who don't live nearby. So the two things we don't penalize kids for in their allotment of screen time is chatting, video chatting, like with family, and also real educational time. So schoolwork is in addition to whatever screen time we talk about. So again, under 2 years, we really don't want any screen time. From 2 to 5 years, 1 hour or less of non-educational screen time is really the recommendation. And older than 6 years, the general trend is about, in recommendation, is really about 2 hours in addition to whatever educational time and video chatting, maybe with family, kids may do. So that's the recommendations. And of course, whatever we want to give our kids, they want more. So what can we do to make it easier and to make screen time work? Let's talk about 6 recommendations. So my first one is to have discussions with kids about why we have screen time in the first place and why we're concerned. And my example is if you're working and your boss hands down a rule that you don't understand and you think is ridiculous, you're probably going to resent it and you may see it as a power struggle. And if you think about screen time from a kid's perspective, they love the activity. And if they don't understand why it's being handed down to them, they often do see it as a power struggle and see it as unfair. And from my point of view, I think that if we start discussing it at a young age with kids, and we tell them that excess screen time takes away from a kid's creativity, and we want our kids to grow up with strong, creative thinking brains, I think it really goes a long way in helping get them on board and helping them to understand why we're doing it, that it's not a power struggle. We're not doing it to be mean or to punish them. We're actually doing it to protect them and to help them. And I think it's a really basic tenet of respect to explain this to your child. I think it's respectful, not just to tell them this is the law, this is the rule of the land, but to tell them this is why we're doing it. It's a basic respect. And as humans, we're entitled to respect. So I think that's a first thing that's really important. A second key that I think is helpful is, especially with young kids, it can be upsetting to them when screen time ends abruptly, when all of a sudden a parent comes to them and says, screen time is over, turn your screen off, put it away. And kids are surprised, they don't realize it's time, and they may start crying, they may be upset. So I think letting kids know in advance that screen time is going to be coming to an end, maybe in 5 minutes, can be really helpful. I think you may want to leave clocks or watches or timers around so kids can be aware, so that when it comes to an end, it's not a shock to them. And the other suggestion is, one of the reasons that kids are very often upset when screen time comes to an end is they don't have any plan for what comes next. So they really feel sad and upset that they're ending this activity when they have nothing to go to. So I feel that it's a good key, especially in the beginning, to help prepare kids to have activities to go to when screen time comes to an end, so they don't feel like they're going to nothing. So maybe they have an art project that they can have waiting for them, or a book that they want to read, or physical activities, sports, or music, or dancing, or something they can really enjoy and look forward to, so that ending screen time isn't the end of good time, that they have something to look forward to. I love the idea, by the way, of having books ready for them that they'll really be motivated and interested in reading. I did a YouTube video recently about getting kids motivated in reading. And I think that if you can combine these two needs, I love meeting two needs at once. And we want kids to enjoy reading and be motivated readers. So if you can line up some books that kids will really be interested in, that might be a useful activity to have on the foreground when kids are finished with screen time, to have something they like to do. And maybe even they're going to read a book and then draw a picture about it afterwards, or something that's really positive, optimistic, that they can look forward to. So again, when kids end screen time, let's help them have a reason to have some optimism in the next activity. The third key that I'm going to talk about is what I call know where and know what. So know where your kids store their devices and try not to have them store it in the bedroom. Because if you do, when you turn out the lights and they're supposed to be going to sleep, it's too much of a lure that they could possibly sneak their device out and do it in the dark or under the covers and sneak in some extra unallowed screen time. So devices should always be stored outside of the bedroom where parents know they'll be protected and not overused. So we talked about know where, now know what. Know what your kids are doing on the computer, especially older kids. And that's part of the discussion about screen time. Kids should be accountable to tell you what they're doing on the computer, what sites they're on, so you can oversee and make sure they're not doing something that you really don't want them to be doing. And that brings me to number 4, which is a really important one about stopping the battles. And that is stop the negotiations. So I see so many parenting experts on YouTube videos and in books and chapters and other presentations where they say, tell your child if they don't do their chores, they're going to lose screen time. And I'm here to tell you, don't use screen time as a punishment, because by doing that, you've just introduced a negative trigger. You've made an emotional trigger in screen time that didn't exist before. And when you tell a kid they can't have something, what happens? They want it even more than they did before. So by making it the tool of a punishment, you turn it into something that it wasn't beforehand. Let screen time just be screen time. And again, if you told your child that you can have 1 hour of screen time, but then you take time away, then your word is not consistent. It's important to be consistent always. If you say an hour screen time, and if that's what you mean, then it's really important to keep your word, to keep your deal with your child. I also hear the same parenting experts sometimes say, tell your child if they do their chores or if they do something extra, they can get extra screen time. Again, by doing that, you're making screen time negotiable. So your rule that screen time is 1 hour or 2 hours is now not the truth anymore. That opens up screen time to being negotiable, and it opens it up to the battlegrounds. My recommendation, no negotiation, and then there are no battlegrounds. Screen time is screen time, just like the sky is blue, the grass is green, screen time is screen time. So there's no negotiation. We always know, everybody in the house, everybody in the family knows what screen time is. And there's no emotions associated with that, no negative triggers. We've discussed it. And we've discussed with our kids why screen time is important. Again, because we want them to grow creative brains, healthy brains, thinking, logical, smart brains. We don't want them to sit as passive bystanders, as consumers. We want them to be active thinkers. And number 5 is have off times at homes for devices and have family rules about screen time. So for example, at meal times, during dinner, screen times should be off for everybody so that you can sit, have a meal together, have a conversation, and check in with each other how your day is going. And that rule should be the same for kids and adults. So we want as adults to be good role models for our kids, and we need to be good role models, because if our kids see us on devices all the time, nonstop, then they think it's good and it's acceptable, and they want to know why they can't do it either. So there should be no screen time during meals and during family time. So let's say you have game night, or let's say you have a family picnic. You don't want people sitting there with screens on their computers. You want it really to be family time. And again, family rules and family discussions stop the battlegrounds because we've discussed the reasons for screen time and we've discussed the rules when we use screen time and when we don't. So those are really important rules. And the sixth one is for older kids. It's really helpful to have a family screen document about what the rules are, what the reasons are. We want to make sure our kids develop healthy thinking processes and what our agreements are, that screen time will be X number of hours. We will keep our devices in our book bags downstairs. We'll have our screens turned off an hour before bedtime, an hour to an hour and a half before bedtime, because we don't want to be around blue light. Again, all of these rules, have them written down. So if there are issues that come up, it's not your fault personally. It's not like a power struggle where you're saying, this is my rule. This is what our family has agreed to. And if you'd like help designing a family document, I'm happy to help you with that. If you'd like me to help you with that, or again, if you'd like a copy of my notes on this topic, feel free to contact me. You can either email me at ellenwillhelp@gmail.com, or you can set up an appointment on my calendar and we can discuss it as well. I'll try to put my calendar link underneath our video today. So again, screen time is one of many topics that I talk about with my clients, with the parents that I work with. If you'd like to fast track a lot of the topics and learn more, feel free to contact me. Again, if you'd like a copy of my notes, feel free to contact me as well. I'm going to ask you, I'd like to ask you, I'm curious, of the 6 comments, of the 6 suggestions I gave, I'd like to know what your favorite takeaway was. What's your favorite aha moment in the suggestions? If you can write it in the comments. So was your favorite suggestion just being honest and having discussions with kids so that they understand the reason for screen time and they don't think it's a power issue? Or was an important one that it's important to know where your child stores their screens? Or was an important one not to use screen time as a punishment or as a reward, because that opens up negotiations and that makes screen time, it opens up the ground for battlegrounds, for struggles on screen time. So again, I'm curious what your favorite one was. I do know that mothers and fathers that I work with, and teachers also, tell me that these strategies are really helpful in cutting out the battlegrounds and letting screen time work. So I hope this was helpful. As always, if you have any other suggestions you'd like to tell me that you'd like me to cover in videos, feel free to send it to me, send your suggestions in an email to me. And I post a new topic every week. So join me again soon for another new topic. And until then, be strong, be empowered, and let's talk again soon.